You're listening to Thunder Quack Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Thunder Quack Podcast Quarantine Zone. I know we've been gone for a little while. It's been just a little bit over a week. I needed to take a week off. As you might have heard on the Thunder Quack Podcast, I actually ended up hurting my back, I think, from sitting at the desk too much and doing too much podcasting, too much working, and not enough getting out and trying to stay healthy. So I decided that we were going to take a week off. So we did. The other thing you might be noticing is that we never did a live stream for this one. We are not going to do the live streams anymore. We are. It was difficult to schedule, and then having 3 or 4 people in the audience. Although I love having those 3 or 4 people to interact with. That was really good. It just didn't make sense. It just kind of wasn't worthwhile to do that. So we're gonna kind of pivot with the quarantine zone a little bit, and just kind of focus a little bit more on one guest a week, and we're gonna do them pre-recorded and just release them on the podcast stream because that's how everybody's listening anyways. But this week I've got a very special guest. In my opinion, I don't know how you guys will feel about it because he's really just my friend, but he's gonna give us some insight into a couple of things, and we're gonna talk about some dad stuff. But I'm very excited to have Matt Campbell back on. Actually, this is your first time on Thunder Quack, right?
That's a good question. Hi, everybody. We did an episode, last year when Galaxy's Edge opened, right?
Yeah, but that would have been Rebel Cells, I think. Yeah, that was Rebel Cells. That wasn't Thunderquack.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
your first time,
your debut on Thunderquack. So maybe some of the people from the Quiver realm might not be familiar with you. I'll give a little brief introduction. Matt is a listener to the Star Wars podcasts from, I don't know, I guess pretty much day one, right?
Yeah, I randomly found you early on. And
back when there were only 12 podcasts on iTunes, so it was easy to find them. I can remember back to 2010. In fact, every once in a while, Facebook will give me the reminder of things that you posted to my wall. And it was just he's just this weird guy that listened to the podcast and really liked to interact, really liked to send me messages and theories and
before it was cool.
Before it was cool. Yeah. And this was were you ever on the message board? Were you in there?
Geez, that's a good question. I mean, I think so.
Because we had the front lines message board way back in the day, with the Geek Out Loud message board as part of it. I think.
Yeah, because I was on there,
a million years ago.
and I just didn't interact that well. I wasn't a big message board guy.
Yeah.
So.
But then I guess in 2010, Crystal and I went to Disneyland for our honeymoon, and I think it might have been after that, when we got home and posted pictures, that you were like, hey, next time you're here, you need to let me know. And I was like, oh, okay, sure, whatever, man. A weird person on the internet, I'm totally gonna do that. And then in 2012 we went to Celebration and we went to Disney World, so we didn't end up we hadn't had any plans to go back to Disneyland. In 2014 we decided to go to Disneyland, and I think I might have mentioned it on one of the podcasts, or I posted about it on Facebook, and you were like, hey man, when you get here, seriously hit me up. like let me know when you're coming and whatnot. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. And you're like, no, I'll like, I like hook you up with some special treatment. And I was like, oh, okay, this might be worthwhile. So on that trip, I did two things in 2014. We met Tim, Crystal and I met Tim Gerasi for the first time in person.
Me too.
And then we also met you for the first time in person. And with both of them, I can remember traveling down and saying to Crystal, like, I don't know how this is going to go. This could end up being super awkward. And like, and I really hope we don't end up with like a clinger. It's like I kind of know these guys from online, and obviously Tim does all the stuff with Frontlines, but I don't know how this is going to go. And thankfully, Tim's a wonderful human being, and we had dinner with him, and it was a great time, and we had a lot of fun. And then we met you, and thankfully, like the first time that we met you, you came and you met us. The first night that we were in Disneyland on that trip, and you brought Jason with you.
Yes, I brought a toddler as an icebreaker.
And that was definitely the smart move on your part, because it was like, okay, well, he can't be that weird if he's like bringing his kid to Disneyland and, you know, like to come hang out with us. And we watched the parade together and hung out for a little bit. And I remember getting back to the hotel that night and saying to Crystal, like, thank God he's a normal person. Like, thank God he's just a normal, cool dude. And you did get us some pretty great seats to the fireworks. I think like the next night or something like that. And you always make sure that we're taken care of when we come down to the happiest place on earth. And so I am eternally grateful for that. Which is just a nice perk of having done the podcast and have somebody who works at Disneyland who's a fan. But since 2014, it's like you're not a fan anymore. It's over the subsequent trips to Disneyland and obviously talking online, you're one of my best friends now. So that's the real perk now, is like, oh well, one of my best friends works at Disneyland. It's not a big deal. Every once in a while he sends me some cool stuff, and when we're down there he always makes sure that you know, we know what's up and the best stuff to do. But Crystal just texted me to tell me that I'm talking too much, but I can't be talking too much because she can only hear my side of the conversation. So she hears how long I talk for and then doesn't hear the other side of it. So she only hears when I'm talking and then when I'm quiet. Sorry?
I said you are the host of the show.
I am the host of the show. And I think that I'm giving you a pretty nice introduction to the people who might not know you yet. So that's what I'm going to say. Like, I'm not talking too much. I'm talking the right amount. Because this is just me telling everybody who listens to the podcast how much I appreciate you and what a great person you are and all that stuff. So it's just a love fest. But yeah, like that's been the best thing. And in the context of everything that's happening right now, and with, you know, like the reason why I'm doing the Quarantine Zone podcast and all of that stuff is I am fortunate enough that some of my best friends on the planet I only talk to online, with the exception of like the rare occasion when I get to see them, which is usually at a Star Wars celebration. We'll talk about that in a minute. So like, I mean, I have it scheduled to talk to Cranky every week right now while we're going through Clone Wars. 4 weeks left of that episode, by the way, ridiculous. I'm going to say this one more time. It's not the last time I'll say it, but I'm going to say this one more time for everybody in the back who's not paying attention. Perk your ears up. Listen up. If you are not watching Star Wars The Clone Wars, you're a straight up dum-dum. That's all there is to it. It is one of the best television shows ever made. I don't care. Animation, Star Wars, sci-fi genre, I don't care. It's one of the best TV shows ever. And yeah, it's got peaks and valleys for sure, but man, the peaks are some of the highest highs you'll ever get in a TV show.
This week's episode is a peak, man.
This week's episode, thus far, we got 3 episodes left. Thus far, this week's episode, probably the best episode of the entire series.
And and the animation on it is just the best there's been so far.
It's mind-blowing. It's ridiculous how good it is. There are some shots that are direct references to Revenge of the Sith because we're coming right up to the events of Revenge of the Sith. Like, this episode basically butts right up against that time. And there are some shots of some of the other Jedi on the other planets that aren't part of the story that this arc deals with. And when you see those screenshots scrolling past on Twitter, you can't tell them apart from the movie. And I was saying that on one Twitter thread today, Grievous looks better on the Clone Wars than he like in his one shot than he did in Revenge of the Sith. He like just the way that they lit him and the model and everything. Like, he just looks fantastic. Man, how did I get? Yeah, Crinky. So I'm talking to him every week. I'm talking to Amanda every week, obviously. So that's nice. That's covered. But I wanted to make sure that I was making time to check in with my other friends all over. I guess all over the world. I have to make some time and get somebody on here who's not in North America. But I'll figure that out.
On the West Coast.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so that's the whole reason that I'm doing this, is to stay connected with friends, and then, you know, we can throw a little bit of entertainment everybody's way at the same time. So tonight, Matt and I are going to talk about, we're going to touch on three things. We're going to talk about, because you work at Disneyland, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what that's been like over the last month and a bit. We're going to talk about the cancellation of San Diego Comic-Con and what that's probably going to mean for other things, such as Star Wars Celebration. And then we're going to talk about a great television show that is near and dear to both of our hearts, Bluey. So we're going to get into all three of those things. This might end up being a long episode.
It might.
But let's start with Disneyland. Let's talk about that. So you work in custodial at Disneyland, right?
I am now. I have been in custodial for 18 years now, and I started as a sweeper, and now I'm an operations manager with the department, and have been for almost 2 years now. How time flies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of a weird thing, because had you asked me, I think literally up until the day, because you and I talk almost every day, and we were talking about like what's going to happen with Disney. And I'm sure you can scroll back in your messages and find me going, Disney isn't going to close. If they close, that's when you start worrying. And right up until, a month ago, I was like, we're not closing. And then they were like, oh, we're closing. And I went, what? Like, wait a minute. It just got real, like that we're closing, because I always kind of say, like, it'll be a cold day in hell, pardon my language, before Disneyland closes its gates to guests.
Yeah.
At all. And then it was just like, oh, this is a real thing. And then for me, for like everyone is like, well, what does that mean for us, right? Like, thousands of people are employed, who is essential, who isn't essential, and thank goodness for the first month of it, my team was essential, and we've been there because the park still operates. There's still offices and stuff, and while the vast majority have gone to work from home, we have a security team that has to be there, and so to make sure that things are secure, and we have other resort departments that, while have slimmed down, still have to have somebody at least there to oversee, to make sure that the right button is pushed at the right time, or the right enter key is hit at the right time. So, well, yeah,
even down to stuff like the rides, like you can't, it's like leaving a car in, like, just parked, right? You can't just leave a car parked indefinitely, because when you go back to turn that car back on, something's not going to go right. Yeah. So like, yeah, I'm sure like there's lots of upkeep and stuff that still has to happen, and so much of the park is exposed to the elements that like it's, life goes on whether human beings are there or not. You don't want you don't want to come back to a Disneyland that's been derelict for a couple of months, because God knows what that's going to end up being like. But
well, it's a weird thing. I was on property the first few days after the closing, and so were the majority of my cast, my crew, and we were just, we were essentially just closing up shop, right? Like putting things away, making sure stuff wouldn't get damaged by the weather, and just kind of getting things in order and cleaned up and getting ready for what we call the hibernation. And then after, I think it was like 2 or 3 days, they were like, yeah, okay, well, now we're just going to have everybody work from home, and we'll pay everybody and just stay home. And, let's hope this thing ends quicker, sooner than later. And then, as we know, this was a month ago now, mm-hmm. God, if you'd ever asked me if Disney was going to be closed for over a month, it's a crazy thought to think, just as much as closing its gates. My team, we had been kind of shuffling with a person on site. So I had the opportunity to be on site late last week. And it's crazy weird because we've been getting a lot of rain and spring has sprung. So mm-hmm. the park was gorgeous with all of nature just blooming and the flowers and the typical stuff you see every day. Yeah. But when you're literally like the only person walking around in the park and seeing these things, it's a real surreal moment. It's a crazy thing, but you could tell how quickly like nature had retaken. I mean, you see this just out everywhere, but even Disneyland, where we have ducks and geese and cats and plants and of all, like nature took back real quick and just was like, the ducks are just laying in the middle of this main street. It's their property now. And, it's just like, but at the same time with weather and spring and blossoms and all that stuff, like the park is looking more dirty than I think ever. And it's not dirty. There's just a lot of debris, right? And it's tree debris and tree dust and pine needles and flower petals, and it's just like there's really nobody.
It's the stuff that's in everybody's backyard all of the time, right? That that you got to get out there and you got to clean in your backyard every once in a while. But we don't think about it in terms of something like Disneyland because your team does such a good job on a regular basis. I mean, I've said for forever, since the first time that I went to Disneyland, even before you and I were really friends, that first time that I went with Crystal, the biggest takeaway for me was like, you walk out, and on that trip we also went to Universal, right? And we were kind of comparing the two because we had done like 5 days in Disneyland, and then or maybe 4 days in Disneyland, and then we did our 1 day at Universal, and then we were coming back to do 2 more days at Disneyland. And I can remember on the way back saying to her, like what a difference it was at Universal versus Disneyland. And then especially once we were back in the park, we were back in Disneyland at California Adventure, it was like the difference is that like this place is pristine, right? Like it's very, you have to go out of your way to find the cracks in the facade. I think the last time that I was there in what was that, 2018? Yeah. The only part of the park that I walked into and I was like, well, this needs a little bit of a refurb was Minnie's house in Toontown, and Mickey's house maybe a little bit as well. But like, I think Toontown kind of needs a reinvention in general, in my opinion. But it was like the one place where I was like, yeah, that paint's looking a little bit, and it was probably like at the end of its cycle of like, okay, now we got to go in and deal with that, right? But like when you go to Universal, it's better now because now they've got this was 2010 was when I went. They've got Harry Potter. They've got they just redid the Jurassic Park ride into Jurassic World, and apparently it's fantastic. They've refurbished a lot of Universal in California, but when we were there, it was like like the I can remember saying to Crystal, the Stegosaurus on the Jurassic Park ride. It's like the difference at Disneyland is like you're going through on the train, right? And there's that part where it's like the primeval world, and it's like the dinosaurs are the least scientifically accurate. Like it's definitely like a 1960s version of what they thought dinosaurs were, right? Which is very different from our modern understanding. And yet it's done so well and it's been maintained so well that you're like, that's pretty cool. That's pretty rad. And then you go to the Jurassic Park ride and it's like, these are supposed to be the most, like up to date, sophisticated, like based on the number one dinosaur franchise ever. And the Stegosaurus, like when its head would move, it would kind of had a shake to it, right? Like that mechanical stutter where it's like, you could see that it's just rubber over a metal frame and you're like, that's not real. Right. Whereas at Disneyland, like you forget sometimes that that's not Mickey Mouse when you've just spent 20 minutes circling like in the circuitous route through his whole house, which the layout of Mickey Mouse's house is the most ridiculous thing in the world. It's really not. Whoever the architect was, just a crazy person, but I guess he lives in a cartoon world.
Goofy.
But you go through all of this and you stand in line and you're watching Mickey Mouse cartoons and then you finally get to go see him. You stand in a line watching cartoons to go into another room, which is just another line. And then you get to go in and meet the man himself. And you forget in those moments because there's been so much build up to it. And because from the time that you saw him in the parade and the time you saw him walking around outside and this thing and that thing and the magical map thing, like the performance is so consistent throughout all of them that like when you see Mickey and he's standing right next to you, you're like, that's Mickey Mouse, right? Like you completely forget that that's a person in a costume. And that's the biggest difference. But that cleanliness thing is like you can't sell the Mickey Mouse or the like Big Thunder or now like with the Star Wars stuff, like you can't sell any of that stuff if people are walking around and they're like looking at the place and going like, this place is dirty, except in the places where it's supposed to look a little bit dirty, but
kicking stuff around.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like the planning of like where the garbage cans are, where the bathrooms are, and like that you never have to look for anything. It's always kind of right there. Like that's the thing. And you guys are such a big part of that. So I've said since then, like custodial is the unsung hero, because everybody will talk about the performers. But to me, it's like it's a difficult job, but it's a job that comes with a lot of prestige, right? That's what everybody wants to do. When you say, I work at Disneyland, they go like, oh, are you Mickey Mouse? And it's like, no, that's some 5 foot tall lady is Mickey Mouse. But like you guys are the ones who really make sure that all of the hard work that everybody else is doing is front and center, right? And not like my experience at Universal Studios, where it's like this place is so dirty and gross and barren, and there's nothing here. Like it's just, I don't know, it's awful. I'm not a big fan of Universal. We need to go back because we need to do the Harry Potter stuff, but maybe it's better now. But in 2010, Universal Hollywood was not worthwhile. That was a wasted day for us.
Oh yeah. We went, well, first, thank you for all the kind words about custodial. My team, the Disneyland custodial team in particular, takes a lot of pride in what they do. And they care. I think that's the big thing, is that they not just have pride in what they do, but they care. And they know that they are the unsung heroes, but Walt, it was like Walt's dream. Like this was what Walt wanted, a clean park. Like, yeah, that was his goal. Like, I want my park to be clean. And so
it was one of the number one things, right? He was like, it's got to be a place where parents and kids can both have fun together, and it's got to not be gross like the like Coney Island and like the pier and whatever, right? Like it's got to be, it has to be that experience for sure.
Because I don't know that it would be successful, right? Yeah. Like if it, or as successful as it is, because it'd be like, oh, and you know, we get people like yourself who had never been to the park and who go, man, this place is really clean. Like I can hear it when I'm walking through the crowd, and those are the moments where like it makes it all worth it, right? Yeah. You know. There are days where we get swamped, and there are days where we have super messy crowds. It's just it's the way the world works. But when especially the one that really gets me is when I hear a guest or a guest stops me and they go, I go to Disney World and I come here and your park is so much cleaner. And I go, well, mission accomplished, job done. We got the win over Disney World on something. Or our experience here was so much better, and I go, thank you.
Just on that subject, Disneyland over Disney World, for me, first of all, every time Disneyland over Disney World. And the reasons why are, yes, the cleanliness is part of it. I do think that you guys do a better job. The food is better at Disneyland. The food's way better at Disneyland. And then I prefer that everything is kind of closer. Everything's a little bit more compact. It can get a little bit crazy when it's busy, because there's not as much space for everybody to kind of move around. But I mean, look, with Disney World, they just pack more people in. That's kind of the thing there. But I like that you can get from Indiana Jones to the Matterhorn in like 10 minutes, probably less, right? Like if you really know like the right route to go, and you can avoid any like sort of congestion in the crowds, you probably get there in like 5 minutes, right?
Oh yeah.
Whereas like like you want to get from one part of the Magic Kingdom in Disney World to another, so much bigger, and then the wayfinding, like the paths at Disney or at Magic Kingdom specifically are just like, they're not there. Or like Epcot. Mm-hmm. Like Epcot drives me nuts. I get the whole idea of the World Showcase. I understand what the point is, but it's Florida. And if you're there in, let's say, August, like I was when I went, I don't want to be walking around a parking lot next to a lake for 4 or 5 hours, right? Like the World Showcase is so obnoxious, because it's like some of them have no shade, and like some of them have no buildings to go inside of, and then to get from one world to the next world, they're not actually connected. You have to come back out of this country and walk along a promenade to get into the next country, and it's like it's like 45 degrees and sunny. Like I don't want to do this. It's awful. I hate it. I do not like it. Yeah.
The best part is you haven't done Florida with kids.
That's true. Yeah. And it was just Crystal and I look, this is one of those conversations that we have a lot, is like, when are we going to go back to Disney World? And there hasn't really been a reason, up until they announced the Star Wars themed hotel. Right. Uh-huh. So we're going to get back there once that opens. If it ever opens, because the world has gone crazy,
and stopped working on it.
But whenever that happens, we'll get around to it. But the idea of taking Cassie there, I think Cara is getting to be old enough, like, because we're talking about something that'll probably happen. We'll go back to Disney World in like probably 2 years, but. For Cat, like, because Cara she'll be like almost 6 by that point, right? But Cassie will be around 2.5, 3, and doing one of those parks with a kid that small would just be torture. Yeah, I can't imagine. I can't imagine taking a kid younger than 5 to Disney World. Because it's so much walking. It's so much more walking. Like there are days at Disneyland where we'll go from like, oh, I got to ride Indiana Jones because I got to ride it every day. If it's open, I got to ride it at least once. When we're in California and we've got a park hopper for that day, I have to ride it at least once. Thankfully, sometimes it's not a concern because that ride breaks all the time and is down for maintenance frequently. But so sometimes you don't get a choice. But it's like you can go like, okay, well, we're doing a California Adventure Day today. Okay, so we're in California Adventure, but I'm gonna run over to Disneyland, get in there, ride Indiana Jones, and then come back. It's not a big deal. I'll do that, and I'll be gone maybe 45 minutes. If you wanted to go from one park to another, it's a 45-minute trip just to get to another park.
Yeah,
right? Like,
I mean, I don't know if we have time.
It's crazy.
Yeah, they're definitely working on their especially their on property guest transportation. You know, they've got the new Sky Bucket thing. Yeah. And then the quote unquote minivans, which are just basically a Disney Uber. But like, is it like branded like mini, like MINNIE? Yes. Vans? Yes. Nice. Minivans, and they've got the giant sticker, whatever thing on all the vans. So they look like the polka dot, the mini polka dot. Yeah. But we went, gosh, I think Hunter was probably 2 or 3 years ago. Because my wife loves to go, and with each kid, if for those of you who don't know, I have 4 kids now, and with each kid, I seem to end up going there with one of them as a toddler. So we have a giant stroller in tow, and 10 bags, and that's just to go to the park for the day, because it's just like you got to have everybody's snacks, and you got to have all this stuff, and you got to have changes of clothes just in case and rain ponchos because it's Florida, because it rains every day. But like getting from your hotel to the park is just a tedious 45-minute to an hour and a half nightmare. If you're a parent with a stroller and a kid and a toddler, it's not fun. And typically, at least for me, and I assume most parents, by the time you're to the park, you're so stressed out and already just over it. Yeah. But it's just, Florida is just a different beast. And it's great once you're in the park and everything's good and it's all spread out and you got space, but then, like you said, to go to another park is a tedious thing. And for safety reasons, kids can't stay in strollers while you're in transportation. You have to hold them. So now you've got this giant stroller that's folded, plus the 4 bags over your shoulder and an infant in the other arm. And then there's, 5 or 6 other groups doing the same thing. There's a couple people in electrical wheelchairs and just everybody's in a bad mood because it's hot and humid and it's Florida. As opposed to a nice, beautiful, dry heat in California, and everything just right there. Hey, guess what? I can't find anywhere to eat in California Adventure that night. We can just pop over to downtown Disney and have dinner there. That's what Crystal and I did. We were there last time because we wanted to go to the Italian place in California Adventure that's the wine country trattoria thing or whatever it's called. I can never remember the name of it. It's my favorite place to eat down there, but it doesn't matter. And they were super busy. We didn't account for how busy that trip was going to be. It was nuts. And we didn't make a reservation, so they were like, we got no tables left for the entire night. And we were like, okay, cool. I guess we're going to go someplace else. So we just kind of called an audible and went, we'll just go to downtown Disney. There's 5 places to eat over there. It's just right there. Whereas if you wanted to get out of the park and go have a somewhat nicer dinner, I mean, you're at a Disney resort. You can't escape children screaming. It's just everywhere. But especially if I'm around. Yeah. But downtown Disney is at least a little bit better. And then they changed it, right? It's Disney Springs now. Well, in Florida, it's Disney Springs. Yeah. In Florida, California, we're still downtown Disney, but
But yeah, like Disney Springs is like another park away, basically, right? Like it's not adjacent to anything, really.
Oh no, it's not close to anything. It's like another 45-minute bus ride or shuttle ride.
Oh, it's just the worst. It's just the worst. Plus, you're in Florida. Like, anyways.
We could go all night about this.
Yeah, we could just gripe about Florida versus California. But we do want to get back eventually, but it's not high on the list at the moment, that's for sure. But we were planning a trip. We've even booked a hotel already, and it was a very big deal because we're gonna stay at Paradise Pier, which is one of the actual Disneyland resort hotels. And Amanda is coming with us, and like it's a whole thing, and obviously it coincides with Star Wars Celebration, and that's in August. It's the end of August, so there's still the sliver of hope that things won't have to be canceled and that we won't have to completely reschedule and figure out a different time to come. But here's the thing. Even if Star Wars Celebration is going ahead, even if Disneyland is back open and operating by then, there's no guarantee that travel bans are going to be lifted, right? That to me is the biggest thing that no one's accounting for right now. People are still thinking about the virus itself and, whether or not we flatten the curve by then. I do think that if you look at where the numbers are at right now on the West Coast, that's British Columbia all the way down to you guys and past to you guys. Like the West Coast has done a very good job. And we don't need to get into all the politics of Trump and all that stuff right now. But the stuff that he said today, very scary rhetoric coming from someone who's supposed to be leading the country and uniting people in a time like this. You guys, your government, your local governments have done, I think, the best job that they can, right? And some areas were a little bit slower in reacting to it than others, but I think that overall, certainly in the U.S., California's done the best job, I think, of flattening the curve. So
we were definitely one of the first ones to hey, this is going to be a problem. Everybody stay home. Yeah. We were, and but we're also one of the, we've got more people. We talked earlier about Arizona. There's 3 major cities in Arizona, maybe 4. LA alone probably has more than 2 of those combined. And LA just leads into Orange County or leads into Pasadena, which leads into Riverside and where I'm at. And there's a lot of people crammed in that Southern California as well as up in the Bay Area. And so I think it was right that we did what we did as quick. I don't know that I personally agree with curfews or whatever. That stuff doesn't really bother me, but here in Southern California, I think we did everything that we could have done, but I don't think a lot of, there was still a good amount of people who didn't take it serious.
Yeah.
They just all acted like, well, hey, I'm getting paid to not go to work. What can I do with my free time? Mm-hmm. And it's like, no. You missed that part where it was like, you need to stay home.
Yeah.
Go home. And I think it was funny because this story is so weird. And you kind of get it because I talk about it all the time. But it was that first Monday where everything was closed. And I was just like, we didn't have anything in the house. So I was like, I'm going to do a burger run and I'm going to go to In-N-Out. And In-N-Out typically is a half-hour line to get through at the very least. And I pulled up to In-N-Out, and there was 1 car in the drive-thru ahead of me. And I was like, "Wow, this is a surreal moment. Not just walking around Disneyland empty, but just being out and about in town.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when it, like, everybody was like, whoa, what's going on? And like, we're not going out of our house. And that was kind of when everyone was kind of freaking out a little bit. But I was just like, wow, I just went through the In-N-Out drive-through in like 5 minutes and got, everybody burgers and fries and all that stuff. And it was like, but every day since then, I've noticed more and more people are coming out. They've binged watched all their Netflix and they don't know what to do, so they're going out. And then of course, we want to keep money going into these places, so it's the whole thing about take out Tuesday, go find a local business or local business Wednesday or whatever the thing is that they're so you want to try and keep places getting money coming in so they don't close up shop. But at the same time, like, people were still out. It baffles me when I see like groups of people out at like the park and stuff. Like, we go out for our daily walks, but we avoid people. Like, you see somebody coming down the same side of the street, you walk to the other side of the street and you just kind of go around them. And that's kind of the courteous thing. It's kind of a weird thing, because prior to this, it's like, oh, you be polite to everybody and you say hi in passing and da-da-da. But now you like run to the other side of the street and you wave at each other from across the street or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's so a lot of people weren't listening. A lot of people listened. Like, you could tell, you could feel it out. And, as I was driving to work, like, I'll sit on the 91 freeway for 45 minutes trying to get to Disneyland. And I went to work those couple days, and I was like, I didn't have to stop once. I was like, this is weird, and it's that thing where, like, you could get used to this, but the world's ultimately gonna go back to normal at some point. But like, I'm like, oh man.
Yeah. So this is my thing is that I think that we've all done a really good job of flattening the curve. British Columbia, Vancouver specifically, hasn't really had many new cases over the last few days, like really over the last week. We're starting, like, there's been a steady decline in new cases. And that's great, because that's exactly what we wanted to see. That's why we're all staying home. It kind of, to your point, that's when people are getting a little bit emboldened to be like, well, it's not that big of a deal, so I can go out now. And it's like, no, now is not the right time. We have to still kind of see this out. Like, I think that there's a misconception that, like, we're doing this so that we can all not get infected. And the reality of it is that we're doing this so that we can control the pace at which people get infected, right? And there are only two scenarios where life goes back to normal. The first scenario is that everybody ostensibly has already had it. And so, we've all built up immunity to it, and we can kind of go back to our daily lives, because if you're immune to it, then you're not going to be a carrier. There's still the risk of infection via, like, touching surfaces and stuff like that. But at least you won't have the virus being as mobile as it is right now. The other scenario is that we develop either an effective treatment so that when people do get infected, they can recover quickly and reliably and safely, or we have a vaccine. The vaccine's not coming for another probably like 17 months at this point, right? They said 18 months a month ago. So I'm going to say we're at 17 months, but who knows? Maybe we're still at 18 months. And
they're still not very far into that. Like,
and there's just no way to accelerate that process, right? Like, there are a lot of promising vaccines that are going into the study process now, but part of that study is a literal waiting game of like, okay, we've given you the vaccine that we think works. So once you've got to get to human trials at that point, and so you're at human trials, you've given somebody the vaccine. Now we got to wait and see, do you get it? Right? Like, it's not just a matter of oh, we made the thing and now everybody gets it. No. Like, we got to find out, like, does it work well? Is it effective in all cases? Like, is it effective across the board? Are there any side effects to this vaccine? Right?
Yeah. Does it work on everybody?
Does it work on everybody? Like, is it gonna cause problems for this, that, or the other thing? Right? Like, there's a lot of, like, there's a scientific process that has to go into this, and it's for everyone's safety. So these are not steps that you can skip. There is no easy way to deal with it. I think the more promising road at the moment has to do with reliable treatment methods, because right now we don't really have a lot of great treatments for people who are confirmed with it. There are some things that they can do, but obviously, as we've seen in China and in Italy and most recently in New York City, it can overwhelm a healthcare system very quickly, because there's just not an effective way to it's not, there isn't a pill or, you know, like a drug regimen that you can put somebody on that's just like, here, this is going to help you deal with symptoms, this is going to alleviate some of the risks. That we just don't have that stuff yet. So a lot of it is actual, like, mechanical stuff, like ventilators, which like that's anytime you're intubated is going to be risky anyways, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, it's just such a difficult virus to deal with. But you know, like, I think that within the next year we'll get to a place where there will be treatments and there will be ways of dealing with it. But life is not going to go back to normal, I think, within the next 12 months. And I think anybody who's kind of waiting for things to go back to normal, expecting that by August, when Star Wars Celebration is scheduled, that we'll be back to business as usual, that's a very ridiculous concept, in my opinion.
And Celebration, much like San Diego Comic-Con, is in the heart of Anaheim.
Yep.
Literally across the street from Disneyland.
Yep.
It holds 40 to 50,000 plus people in and of itself, and it's sold out. You know, and all those people plan to go to, typically, I know, Mike, you do.
Yep.
And plan to go to Disneyland after the events of the day at Celebration. So you're adding 40, 50,000 to the already 40, 50,000 who were at Disneyland for that day.
Yeah. And that's basically capacity for you guys, right?
Right.
Like,
and that's what they're telling us not to do.
Yeah.
Literally.
And if you've ever been to a Disney park at capacity, capacity doesn't mean everybody is in there comfortably.
No,
capacity means everybody's in there and it's relatively safe, I guess, if everybody's cool. Like, if everybody can just be chill, we'll all be fine. But if something went wrong when that park's at capacity, God, I like an earthquake or something like that, like a massive earthquake. That's a scary prospect. So because you're shoulder to shoulder, right?
I want to clarify. The scary part is the guests, not Disneyland itself. I just want to clarify.
Yeah,
we have procedures to solve all those problems.
No, for sure. Yeah. I'm talking about the quote from Men in Black where it's like, a person is an intelligent, rational, whatever, but people are nervous, anxious, you know, like stupid animal. And that's what I'm talking about. And everybody is deservedly so, just trying to save themselves, their loved ones, and to get out of there. Yeah.
And that's, while yes, that's a good thing, it's also not the best thing for the mass. Exactly. You know, like, so there's an amazing, just real quick, because I know we're trying to get through this, but there's an amazing video from Tokyo Disney that's out there from when they had the big earthquake that caused Fukushima, and we watch it, we show it in our classes and stuff, where everyone just sits down. All the guests just sat down.
Yeah.
And they were there for overnight. You know, we have, you know, Disney provides food and shelter and stuff in those circumstances, but everyone just sat down, and it was like the most beautiful thing. Like, but that culture is also
yeah.
trained to deal with those things.
Yeah, there's some of that footage is in the Imagineering story on Disney Plus.
Oh, is it? Fantastic!
Yeah.
I haven't watched that yet.
Yeah, because they talk about it because the Imagineering story is such a great show. It really goes through the whole history of the Disney parks all the way up to now. And one of the episodes has a whole section that really focuses on what happened with that earthquake and then the subsequent like sort of tourism fallout and everything that happened afterwards. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. People were great, but like you said, like that's a culture that is very well versed in that because they get regular earthquakes, right?
Yeah,
California gets regular earthquakes. But let me tell you, Disneyland, the guests are not comprised of people solely from California at any given time.
Right.
I will say there are far too many annual pass holders in there at any moment, which are generally Southern California residents. But there's also a lot of people from all over the world and from all over the United States and Canada and North America and whatnot. So people who are not used to earthquakes that would be like, ah! Myself included, probably. But the whole point of what I was saying is that, like, can you imagine that situation? And then we're all worried about staying 6 feet apart from one another. Right. Like, it's just, Disneyland is not, I just don't think it's tenable until we get back to a situation where people can safely be in a lineup waiting for Radiator Springs Racers, and we're less than a foot away from one another. You're uncomfortably touching somebody's thigh,
Those decisions are made far above me, and I know that they have been. I can safely say that those people at the top who are making those are plotting that and trying to figure out how to get us back open sooner than later, are trying to figure that out. But I mean, for the average person, if you think about it, like, how do you make that other than just making it like 100 people in the park at one time? Like, how do you? Yeah.
And I think I don't know. I can see a reality where when things calm down a little bit, although now they're starting to say, a lot of the experts are saying that this might end up being more of a seasonal thing and that it might flatten the curve. Now it'll die down and then life will kind of resume a little bit. People will start to go back to work and that sort of thing. And then that will it will end up with a second wave in like October, November.
Early December, late November is when we get flu season here typically. And that's when I think that's when they're even kind of saying it started anyway, that the early numbers are in November. But I mean, if we can get open for the summer season and then, deal with it as we're dealing with it week by week right now. If it comes back around, it comes back around.
I think, I think that what you'll see when the park does reopen, whether it's in the near future or in the further, more distant future, I think you'll see a lot of people in the park with masks on. Which is a very interesting thing because that's technically against policy right now. Like that's something that you guys are going to have to adapt to. Which is, like you said, like the people that are way above your pay grade that are making those decisions. That I think that's the sort of thing that they're probably examining right now. And that's the sort of thing where it's like, you get into that conversation, you start going like, but wait, if people are coming to the park, they're paying admission to come into the park. Are we going to turn people away at the gate because they don't have a mask? Right. Or does that now require us to have masks on premises? Right. Like, should we be selling them? Should we be giving them away? Is it okay to be selling them? If we sell them, are we doing that at cost or do we make some money off of it? Like that's a long, difficult conversation. And I think some of the answers are even like just spitballing this. It's like, well, I think that most guests would expect that, like, if people are expected to wear a mask in the park, that they would be provided, and that it would be baked into the cost of a ticket. Right. but at the same time, it's like if you go to Disney World, as we were talking about, it rains constantly. They don't give you a poncho, a rain poncho, right? And you have a choice. You can either get a crappy one-time use plastic poncho, or you can definitely buy nice ponchos at Disney World
with Mickey on them.
Exactly. So can I go into Star Wars land and get a Star Wars themed N95 respirator, right? Because if I can, I want one instantly.
That'd be really cool.
There's not even a question of it, right?
That'd be really cool.
I also want to go over into probably like Adventureland and get like a more like Indiana Jones jungle themed one as well, right? Like just because when I go home, if I'm going to keep using these things, right? What's the timeline on doing something like producing those masks? Again, like is this a profitable enterprise, or is this something that we're doing because we're concerned about safety? So are we not worried about a profit on this? Are we just going to kind of, run a tight margin on these just so that we're covering our costs? Like I don't envy the individuals that are having to have these conversations, because there isn't a right or a wrong answer at the moment. There are some answers that are more right than others, but it's tough. I do think that until there is a vaccine for this, and until life can go back to normal, that if you guys do reopen, that it's going to have to be at reduced capacity. It just has to be, right? And reduced capacity is a difficult thing, because then that means that you're not bringing as much revenue. Are ticket prices going to go up in the interim? Like in the meantime, what do you do about annual pass holders? What do you do about the family who's traveled from Oklahoma? Yeah. And they drove all this way, and then, they didn't get there till 10 in the morning, and the park's already maxed out at whatever number it is. Those are things we have to consider. Yeah. So is it going to be pre-bought tickets only? And right now, if you buy a ticket for Disneyland, like I buy a ticket for Disneyland today, theoretically, hypothetically, I don't know if you guys are doing ticket sales at the moment, but hypothetically, you could buy a ticket today, and that ticket has an eventual expiration date usually, especially if there's a promotion for it. But it's a pretty big window, right? Of I can buy, because what Crystal and I will do is we usually buy like a 5-day park hopper or something like that, right? Depending on how long we're staying. And like when we went for our honeymoon, we did like the first 4 days that we were there, we went to Disneyland, and then we did other stuff in between, and then we came back and did the other days, and it's open. Like the ticket isn't counted as used until you swipe in, right? Is that going to have to change? Is it going to have to be a situation of I'm buying this ticket for a specific day, because only people with tickets for specific days are going to get in, and that way you can control to the exact number in advance how many people are coming to the park, right? But then that also means like reduced revenue, reduced attendance. It means probably reduced staff, right? Which isn't optimal for you guys, because it either means that people are working less shifts, or some people continue to be furloughed until you're back up to full operation. So like I said, like these conversations are difficult. There's actually a lot of math that has to be done in order to figure out like what's the number, what's the break even point where we can start opening back up and we're not losing money every day by being closed, right? And when is that going to be safe? When is the governor going to say that that's safe? Obviously the president is saying do it now. Whatever. It's probably all fake anyways. Cause he's a real big dum-dum, but thankfully you guys have an at least, I don't know how smart your governor is, but at least he's being sensible.
Well, I mean, I'll just say I kind of have the same opinion of politicians as Obi-Wan does. So.
A totally reasonable place to be in. Yeah.
Having said all that, to bring it back around, Comic-Con was canceled today.
Yeah. Comic-Con was canceled today, which means that I think Star Wars Celebration isn't far off. But man, It's unprecedented. In the 50 years that Comic-Con has been running, it's never been canceled. This is the first time in 50 years that there hasn't been a Comic-Con in San Diego. So that's a big deal. It's a big deal not just for Comic-Con itself, but for the entertainment industry, because everybody knows Comic-Con has become like, that's the place. So many things are announced, revealed. We get our first trailer, we get this, that. It's all Comic-Con, right? Like that's usually when we find out about new movies and new TV shows.
Right.
Without that, I don't know what a lot of these companies are going to do. Maybe they'll have to just figure out their own sort of online distribution method for getting that news out there. It's kind of crazy.
Being kind of optimistic, as I always try to think of like the better end of this in the long run. I hope that Comic-Con, whoever does all the planning or whatever for Comic-Con, takes this opportunity to kind of make Comic-Con better, because as big as Comic-Con is, it is a dumpster fire. Like it is. Yeah. I mean, it's. I went for years and years and years, and each year that I went, as it got bigger and bigger, was getting worse and worse. And part of the problem is a lot of the people who work there are volunteers, and it's nothing against them. But the average person, especially the Marine jughead from the Marine base up the road, who is volunteering and yelling at a bunch of nerds, like, is not helping. Especially when you have, a couple hundred of them trying to be the first into a room for a panel, and the line is not orderly in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. There is sometimes no line. I remember the last time I went, I was trying to get into a panel, and the line was, people typically will form a line on their own and it'll be fine. But then you get the volunteer who comes along and doesn't know what's going on, trying to fix something. And I was in this line for a panel, and one of the volunteers came up and he just stood there and he was like looking at this mob of people, which was a line, but he's like, "Oh, okay, everyone, I need you to just turn around." And it's just like, "Wait, what?" And he's like, "Just you're all facing the wrong way. Turn around." And then I stopped him. I said, "I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but if everybody turns around, the person who is behind them is now the person in front of them. And you're going to have a lot of angry people who have been here for an hour because you are now going to let the last of the line in first." Yeah. And he did not care. And needless to say, it was, once they opened the door, it was a stampede, and it was not even.
You should have prefaced that differently. You should have said, "I am here to tell you how to do your job. I work at Disneyland. Right. I know a thing or two about orderly lines. You're about to cause chaos."
I work in an industry with lines. Just going to let you know. Yeah. This isn't going to end well for you or anybody else. But yeah, nobody ever listens to me when I speak. So that was one of the last times I went to Comic-Con, because it was just like, and in this day and age of technology where I can go online and book a seat in a movie theater, at any point, I should be able to book a seat in a panel at these conventions and not have to worry about a fight.
Celebration has figured this out, and the big panels are meant to be basically pre-registered, right? Right. And I mean, like, I was really looking forward to that. In fact, for the first time at a Star Wars celebration, I bought tickets. At all of the past celebrations, we've gone as media, which is to say that we have gone as guests of Reed Pop and Lucasfilm, basically. They're courteous enough to say, yeah, you guys can come in for free because you're going to talk about it on a podcast that, like, maybe a couple thousand people listen to. Sure, whatever. They don't need to be that generous with us. We don't deserve it, but I'm grateful that we've gotten it in the past. And I expect that we'll get media credentials this time as well. But what I saw at the last celebration in Chicago, not personally because I wasn't there, but what I heard anecdotally was none of my media friends, none of my podcast buddies got into any of the big panels with the app. They had the ability to register for them, but none of them got picked in the lottery, which tells me that the media is like last in line, right? Mm-hmm. Because you didn't pay to be there.
Right. And that's a great way to look at it. And that's the way it should be.
And exactly. And I think that a lot of the guys, and I say guys as a gender neutral term, a lot of the folks who get media passes probably be frustrated by that fact. But the simple fact is that but that guy over there that has a Jedi Knight VIP pass, he paid $500 to be here. And you're paying nothing.
Or just so that guy the actually guy.
That guy does deserve first priority seating because he paid $500 to be here. You didn't pay to be here, right? And then the guy who paid $100 to be here goes after him. That is a perfectly logical thing. It's not about Reed Pop is just trying to make a buck. It's like, yes, they are. This is a business. They're not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. We're very lucky that Mary Franklin, who basically runs Star Wars Celebration, that she cares, that she loves Star Wars, is a huge Star Wars fan, and came out of Lucasfilm and now works for Reed Pop, I think. And does care about our experience, and that's what makes Celebration better than Comic-Con. It makes it better than I would say even better than Penny Arcade Expo, which is another Reed Pop one, but that's sort of on a similar level. But Star Wars Celebration is the best con because the people who are running it really care. And it shows in the content of the panels. It shows in the attempts at organization. But yeah, man, convention employees and then volunteers, they always get in the way. They always get in the way of a good con experience. It's awful. And then on top of that, you have the actual attendees that everybody thinks they're the most important person at a convention, right? And it's sort of the lack of cooperation. But that kind of brings up the point for me, and this is what I've said on Rebel Cells talking with Crinky. Can you even fathom being in that environment right now?
Yeah,
with 40,000 people. I don't
at a con. At a con, no. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, con flu is a term, right? And it's because look, I'm gonna go to a convention and I'm gonna be my normal, relatively clean self, right? I don't consider myself a messy or dirty person. Disorganized from time to time, but I wash my hands on a regular basis. I bathe on a regular basis. Not everybody at a convention holds the same ideals about personal cleanliness that I do, certainly, and that many people do. There are a few bad apples that spoil the whole bunch, and in this circumstance, that's deadly, right? There's no way to sort of blunt that point anymore.
It would just take one sick person in one of the panels, and it would just be done.
Yeah,
just done.
It would just spread like wildfire. So, if we want to make sure that the curve flattens and that this thing dissipates as much as possible and stays down for as long as possible, luxuries like Star Wars Celebration just need to not happen. And here's the thing, you and I were talking about this on by text earlier today. It's coming. It's the announcement is coming probably within the next week or two that Celebration is being postponed. There's no way that they're gonna hold this convention because I don't think that they can confidently do it and expect the same numbers as past cons, right? And they've been planning for a 40 to 60,000 attendee convention. and it's not going to happen. Even if they said that it was going forward, there are a lot of people that would be at a Star Wars convention that will choose not to go. They've got young families. They take care of elderly family members. They are in an essential job and they're not going to be able to take the time off that they wanted to take off, or they're immunocompromised themselves and don't want to put themselves at unnecessary risk, right? That's a larger segment of that 40 to 60,000 people person attendance than I think a lot of people realize, because a lot of those reasons for not attending are invisible. Like a person that looks like anybody else could have any one of those problems. So when we go to a con and we see everybody there, it's like, well, everybody here is just like me. No, they're not. Like some people have other things that they have to consider, and it's going to be a lot more people than I think people realize. So I would say that 40,000 number, which is generally what you expect at Star Wars Celebration, is going to be down. I wouldn't be surprised if that number is cut in half. That's a total gut instinct that I have. But in terms of people who are outside of the country, can't travel, let's say you're in Europe, I don't think that Europe's going to be able to travel to North America anytime soon. Yeah, there's certainly not in August.
Big groups that we've seen before and at other cons from England, and big groups from Australia. I mean, I know I've run into them. So
I have listeners from Frontlines and Rebel Cells that come from both of those regions, both the UK and from Australia, and they would probably not be able to travel. Sure. Even me in Canada, I don't know that the border will be open for me to come down in August, right? Yeah. Even if everything else has kind of settled a little bit and we're all able to kind of go back to some semblance of normalcy, those borders are going to be closed until COVID-19 is manageable, right? Until we have those treatments or we have the vaccine. Those are the two scenarios. Because I think even within populations, it's in BC, our numbers are still very low compared to other places, certainly compared to the rest of Canada. Even when you look at it per 1 million people, if you break it down to the sort of per capita type of statistics, it's still very low for us, which means that the risk out there isn't as high, right? There is still a risk though. So people are going to be able to, I think, go back to some sort of normalcy soon, but it's going to be normalcy with a lot of caveats, right? There's going to be a lot of asterisks on what normal means. And I even if we've got it controlled here, the second that you open the border back up and the flow of traffic between here and the United States increases, and international, intercontinental borders between here in Asia and here in Europe, you're talking about what got us into this situation in the first place, right? So I just don't think that stuff's going to be a reality. And so if you cut it down to just the people who are comfortable attending and don't have to worry about a travel restriction and can actually physically get there, I think you're talking about 20,000 people. And I think that's optimistic. I think that's hopeful.
And I think one other point to that, and probably the final point to that, is that are the people we're going to want to see even going to be there?
Yeah.
And I don't think they would be. I mean, I know a handful of people from Lucasfilm, and they are on work from home. They're all not out doing anything either. So I don't think that, I don't know that Dave Filoni or Matt Martin or Leland Shee or any of the actors are going to want to come to this convention. I don't think they're going to be there. The risk is high for them as well. This is their profession, but at the same time, they have to be safe as well. And
well, it doesn't discriminate, right? And we know that because at the very early stages of this concern, like I think that one of the biggest red flags, like you said, when Disneyland closes, we know this is serious, but it's like we know this is real because Tom Hanks got it, right? If Tom Hanks, America's sweetheart, can get COVID-19, anyone can. It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care how wonderful a human being you are, or how talented you are, or how poor you are, or how despicable you are. It doesn't matter. It affects everybody the same. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't say that. Some people are not as adversely affected by getting coronavirus as others, but the potential of you getting it is exactly the same, which means that your potential of spreading it is exactly the same. So yeah, I don't think it's happening. I think that I've prepared myself mentally and emotionally, and now I'm almost at the point where, like, if it is going to happen, if they don't cancel it and I am able to travel there, it's a, like, I don't think I want to. Right. As much as I want to be at Star Wars Celebration because it is like coming home, right? And it's one of the best experiences. Like the times that I've been to Celebration are some of the best experiences of my life. This would be the first one with the girls, and that's a big deal. Something that we were really looking forward to.
And our families were going to spend a week together.
Yeah, yeah. But now it's like, I don't want my grubby kids coming in contact with your grubby kids, right? Like,
right.
like I don't want them licking their hands and touching each other, right? On either side of that equation. And when you're at Disneyland, there's a lot of licking your hands, whether you want to or not.
There's a lot of licking that railing, licking that window, licking that table, licking your hands.
Yeah.
And it's just like, stop doing that.
Yeah. So yeah. Celebration I think is just gonna be a no-go. I think that they're gonna announce it within the next couple of weeks. They're just trying to figure out when is it gonna happen.
Right.
And my bet is for spring, early spring of next year. And it'll be a slightly different convention than what they were originally planning. And I think Disney and Lucasfilm are going to have to figure out another way to announce some of the things that they were going to announce. Because I think that we were probably going to get the titles for the Cassian Andor series and Kenobi, which we just call them by the name of the main characters right now.
Right.
Kenobi will probably end up being called Kenobi. I don't think that that's a stretch, but I don't think we're going to call the other show Cassian Andor. As much as like The Mandalorian works and Kenobi would work, I don't think the average person knows who Cassian Andor is. No. I think that that's a very like Star Wars fan thing. If you were then like the guy from Rogue One, people would be like, oh, that guy. Or if you would have more success calling that show Star Wars Diego Luna than calling it Star Wars Cassian Andor, because I think more people know it's like, oh, Diego Luna in Rogue One. That's what you're talking about. Than if I said Cassian. I mean, like they'll come up with some cool Star Wars name for it, but
right. But all that stuff's been pushed back, so they may not have information to give at this point.
And that's the other thing, is that the productions are all kind of on hold and in these holding patterns. So, but the animated series, I think, was going to be whatever is coming next from Lucasfilm Animation since they finished Star Wars Resistance. They haven't announced anything. It's all just rumor and speculation at this point. But if you think that they're not working on another show, you're not paying attention. Because the Resistance got cut short because they decided to pivot because nobody liked Resistance. I shouldn't say, and
everybody wanted the Ezra show.
Everybody, there were a lot of people not watching Star Wars Resistance. I'll put it that way. And I don't mean that like that's different than saying it didn't have as many viewers. No, there were a lot of people actively choosing not to watch that show. I think just because of what it was, it was a misfire. Not because it's a bad show, it's a very well made show, but because it's not what the audience that was tuning into Clone Wars and Rebels was tuning into those shows for. Even Rebels went a little bit far afield, and as you can see with Clone Wars coming back right now, it's like, no, like, whatever you guys do next, it's got to be way more in the vein of Clone Wars, if you want it to have the mass appeal that Clone Wars had. But anyways, that's like a whole other conversation for a different time.
I was gonna say real quick, and as quick as our conversations go, but
yeah,
I'm sure, I think you and Amanda have talked about it, but how animation is becoming a popular medium now for development. I don't know if you've seen, even Netflix and Disney have posted on Twitter that they're looking for animators and anyone who can work in animation, storytellers, writers, whatever. Those job postings are going up all over online. I'm curious if we're going to get lucky out of this and get a second. Well, they're obviously going to tell us there's a new animated series.
Yeah.
But maybe even a second or third, because obviously they can't work on the live action stuff for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
But they can start working on these animated shows, get these in development early, and maybe we will get some extra animation stuff, because, you know, animation is the best.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we found out that Galaxy of Adventures was getting like an actual season of 30-minute episodes, and that maybe we would get some new stories, like not just what we've gotten thus far is basically rehashes of existing storytelling from Star Wars, and a lot of like little sort of vignette pieces, montages and whatnot. I wouldn't be surprised if we find out that like actually Galaxy of Adventures Season 3 is going to be 20-minute or maybe even 15-minute episodes, as opposed to like the current like 3 to 5 minute episodes that they're doing. And they're going to have actual stories, and there will be new dialogue and that sort of thing, because I would bet they, like, let's say that it focuses on sequel trilogy characters. I will bet you anything that Daisy Ridley, Oscar Isaac, and John Boyega are like, yeah, I could use a little, like I'm sure they're doing fine for money at the moment. They've made a lot of money off of them Star Wars movies and whatever else they've got in the hopper. But I'm sure that there are a lot of performers that are looking at this and going like, when can I get back to work? Because my house is very expensive.
How many animated voiceovers can I do?
Yeah. And I think when you've got a guy like Ben Schwartz, who is every Blue character in animation, and he's like, I'm fine. I have no problem with this. I'm continuing to work. I've ordered a bunch of stuff and it's in my house now, and I have a recording studio. Although I'm sure Ben Schwartz probably already does. He is currently like my favorite actor at the moment, because he's just such a delightful human being, and he's also he's a Ninja Turtle. He's one of the DuckTales triplets. He's Sonic the Hedgehog. He's a million characters. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to discover that, like, hey, we're actually going to do some stuff that's a little bit more star-studded and a little bit crazier than we would have done otherwise.
I mean, I'm just fine with Sam Witwer just doing Darth Maul all the time. Like,
just the Darth Maul Chronicles. Like, what was he up to between Clone Wars and Rebels when he was we should say between Solo and Rebels, because something happens between Solo and Rebels where something goes wrong in there.
Perfect. Animated. Give me Solo the animated series. Love it.
Oh my God. Yes. Okay. You just said those words, and now nothing else will satisfy. Because if you can get Alden Ehrenreich and Donald Glover, although Donald Glover, like, Lando can't come back into the story, but because it's got to be the last time that they saw each other, because that's the established lore. Don't mess with that. But you get Alden Ehrenreich, you get Sam Witwer, you get what's her face, Daenerys,
Emilia
Clarke, yeah, and a handful of others in there, and you start weaving that story. Oh my God. Yeah, that would be so good. You get Tamura Morrison coming in doing some Boba Fett.
I'm going to go to Twitter right now and just start tagging everybody.
Yeah. I was saying make Solo 2 happen because like that hashtag, which is one of the greatest hashtags on Twitter, on the internet in general. I was saying like Disney Plus series for sure, like live action Disney Plus series. But now that we're in the situation that we're in, Disney Plus animated series all the way. Like, let's make that a reality.
Just change the hashtag. Make Solo 2 animated series happen.
Yeah. Man. Oh, that would be so good. The story of like Han and Jabba and all that stuff. Whew.
And it writes itself, man.
It's there. It's right in front of you. It's just, it's a ripe fruit just waiting to be plucked. Let's talk about, let's shift in animation, talk about Bluey. Let's talk about this TV show that we both love in an inappropriate fashion, I think.
We talk about the show, I think, more now than we do about Star Wars.
Yeah.
You and I.
Well, Star Wars conversations, because the newer stuff, I mean, like, other than talking about Clone Wars, if it gets into Rise of Skywalker, it just gets kind of, it just kind of becomes a bummer. But we gotta have something else to talk about every once in a while. And our kids are obsessed with this TV show, Bluey.
Right.
But come on, you and I are both feeding that obsession with our kids, right?
Oh, at this point, yes. They started watching it, and I was just listening to it in the background. Yeah. I'd be on my phone, probably talking to you. But then, like, one day, I just kind of like stopped and looked at it, and I was like, "Wow, this is actually a really beautifully animated show." Like, typically the stuff on like Nick Jr. and Disney Jr., it's that terrible like 3D like low grade. And I don't want to knock anybody for creating content, whatever, creating content's great. I don't want to knock any artist out there, but that same humdrum kind of 3D animation that you see in kids cartoons now, especially on the Disney Jr. and the Nick Jr. show, where it's just kind of that super repetitive, like, just story over and over again. I don't Puppy Dog Pals and Peppa Pig and, even the Rocketeer, which I had high hopes for, was just really kind of rough to watch. But then like, I just happened to notice like, this is a really beautifully animated like cartoon. Like, it's really colorful. It's really great. And then once I started diving into it, I mean, like, there's some deep level like messages in there, for parents.
Yeah.
and I'm sure as a father, you've seen it, Bandit, is some of those episodes, like you and I talked about, like I messaged you about the episode about work.
Yeah.
The other day where he gets, I mean, it's not real that he gets fired, but he's playing imaginary game with Bluey, and Bluey's his boss, and Bluey fires him, and he's sitting on the curb and having this existential crisis. Meanwhile, I'm getting a message over the phone that I'm being furloughed, having the exact same existential crisis as I'm watching it, and I'm going, this show is way too real. Yeah. And on many levels, like it doesn't pull any punches. Like, it's very real about like its humor and humor about being a parent and humor the things that kids get. If I'm sure you saw it on my Instagram or Facebook story, the kids were watching it, and there's the part where it's the copycat episode. Yeah. And they're doing, and the dad are walking down the street, and the dad starts smacking his butt. Of course, my kids who like love anything that's farts or spanking or whatever, go wild because they think it's the craziest, funniest thing ever. Like, it's just, there's so many good moments in that show. And it's what has saddened me lately is the second season had just started airing, I think last week in Australia. Yeah. Like, we won't see it for a while, probably. That's the number one sad thing. But these shows, as great as that show is, probably won't last that long. Like, nothing is SpongeBob SquarePants, right? Nothing is going to last. Yeah. How long has SpongeBob been on? Like 12, 15 years now? Oh my God. It's ridiculous. Like, and no shows last that long, especially Disney products. They have a turnover rate of about 2, if you're lucky, 3 years. Yeah. If you get past that, like, it's surprising for a Disney show because they know that their demographic ages out. But I mean, this show got an international Emmy for best animated show or something. It's so good, and I don't know if you've been kind of I've been reading stuff about the second season on Twitter, but there's apparently an episode called Sleepy Time. That's another one of the, because they had the Dream State one from the first season called Fruit Bats, where it's like Bluey's dreaming about being a fruit bat, but apparently in the second season, this one's about bingo, and I didn't get the whole premise, but I think she's like going through interstellar space, but like people on Twitter were talking about how emotional it was. Like it's a super emotional episode, and just getting like, these are adults talking about this Disney Junior show about how emotional it is, and
it's an incredible show. My favorite episode is Camping, where
I knew you were going to say that.
they go to a campground, and it's all kind of from Bluey's perspective. She's the main character, so oftentimes it is, but sometimes it'll kind of focus on the family. But this is very much like centered on her, and she meets this other kid, this boy at they're all dogs, but a boy dog. At this, we haven't really explained what it is, but hopefully you guys are like Googling this and seeing pictures and stuff like that, so you have a little bit of context, or just like bring it up on Disney Plus. Everybody's got Disney Plus. Just check it out. But she makes friends with this other kid, and he speaks French, doesn't speak English, and the two of them kind of like find a way of communicating. And that's kind of what the episode is about. But there's this disconnect because Bluey can't understand him. And the episode ends with they've kind of had this routine of like every morning they get up, they meet at this little tree that they planted the first day that they met. They took a seed and they planted it in the ground, and they meet there, and then they go, okay, let's go do our thing. And the last night, Bluey is like, okay, cool, I'll see you tomorrow morning. And he says in French, basically like, oh, I'm leaving tomorrow. This is goodbye. Right. And she doesn't understand at all. She doesn't even like pick up the tone, but he's sad because he knows what she's saying, but she doesn't know what he's saying. They leave, and then like Bluey goes to look for him and is like, doesn't find him at his tent, and goes back, and her mom's like, oh yeah, they left this morning. And you go, okay, well that's the end of the episode, right? It's like, no. And then we cut to the tree, like to this little sprout that has like sprouted out on the last day. And we just see this time lapse of the tree growing and everything kind of happening around it at this campground. And then it stops. Presumably probably like 6 or 7 years later or something like that. And
well, I mean, if you're thinking about
in dog
human
years
time, in dog years versus human time, I think in human time, she's not to spoil it where you were going with it, but I think they come back and they're adults, I think she's a teenager. At least later in teenage years, I would say probably like 16, 17, but there's a significant amount of time that has passed where they're now rediscovering each other at this place. Yeah,
Bluey goes and she sits down under this tree that they planted with a book, and she's going to read a book. And it's what's the other dog's name? Is it Jean-Luc?
It's Jean-Luc. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
He walks up and he says hi, Bluey, and it's just, and that's where the episode ends. And it's just like, and the music is so good. I think that is the biggest thing. The animation is great. The voice performances are all great, and the writing is top notch. But the thing that sends this show over the edge, in the same way that a lot of the stuff that we love does, it's the music. The score for this show is unbelievable. It's so well done, and on occasion they'll just use like a classical music, like sort of like I don't know classical music, but like actual like classical music, right? But they'll kind of do it with this more upbeat sort of vibe. My second favorite episode is the one where they all have to try harder. where Bluey gives up on riding her bike.
Oh, the park, yes,
the park, and she's like all frustrated, and she goes and sits down next to Bandit, and Bandit's like he's like, well, if you give up, you give up. Like I love his parenting style. It's so similar, I think, to you and I. I think that's one of the reasons why we vibe with him, because he's very much like, okay, if you want to give up, you give up, but that means you're never going to learn to ride your bike. Like, I don't know what to tell you, kid. But I'm just going to sit here on the bench and watch, like, and make sure that you guys aren't dead. So come sit next to me if that's what you want to do. And they watch all the other kids, and it's what is it? It's like the William Tell Overture or something like that, right? Or it's like it's building and building, and like that song builds and builds and builds, but it's like this really kind of like poppy, upbeat version of that, that's like really fun and exciting and has all this energy to it, as these three kids that they're watching overcome obstacles that they've encountered, and it's so good, and I don't think it would be there without the music. Like, that's just it's such an important part of it.
Well, that music builds that whole story, because, as like you said, they're trying to figure out like Muffin's trying to figure out how to put a backpack on, and Bingo's trying to figure out how to like get a sip of water out of the drinking fountain, and whatever the little pug dog's name is, he's trying to do the monkey bars, but he can't reach the monkey bars because he's too short, which is a real thing, because if you have young kids, toddlers like you and I do, and you go to the park, they do that same thing. They're like, I can't reach the monkey bars. And it's just like
it's exactly the same thing, because like Kara will be like, I want to do the monkey bars, and you'll take her over there and you'll like lift her up and put her hands on the monkey bars
and just hangs there.
And then she just hangs there and goes, I'd like to get down now. Which is exactly what happens. This kid finally manages to climb up the thing and grab onto the monkey bar, and then it's just like, I'd like to get down now. It's good.
You talk about Bandit, and there's the other episode where they're at the park. I think it's called The Creek, because Bandit, he's just laying on the slide, just like watching them play, and there's the line down the slide, because he's just laying on it, and then they're like, we're bored, and he's like, well, let's go down to the creek. And it was just like those funny things, like,
there's a lot of stuff that he does where it's like one of the things that I really love about the show, because we do love that character Bandit, because he's relatable as a dad. He's a good dad, which is one of the great parts of it. But he's not
better than I am.
But he's not. He's got so much more patience than either of us do. So much more patience. I would have screamed at those kids so much. Oh my god! Like, seriously. No, like some of the like no. For the last time, we are not playing that game today. Right?
Right.
I got stuff to do, but he often uses them as an excuse to not do what he needs to do. He's around more than the mom, and like that's a very interesting element to the show, is that I think in a lot of instances in a show like this, you would have the mom in the primary caretaker role, but it's and you and I did some sleuthing. We did some research to figure out what they do for a living, because it was bothering us. This is how much Matt and I love this show and talk about it, is that we were talking, and it was like, what do they do? Like, their house is so nice. Because that's what we're concerned about when watching it. He's an archaeologist, and she works security at the airport. So she's often gone working, and he works from home a lot. So he's like, there's a lot of stories where he's like, you guys, I gotta get back to work. And that's super relatable for me in general, because I work from home on a regular basis. And I'm sure, like, for you in that month that you were kind of working but not working, it's like, it's super relatable, right? But it's just nice to see, I think, for a change, a TV show now with a dad who's not a complete dunce, right? Like that Homer Simpson effect in the late 90s, where like every dad has to be a hapless idiot with a heart of gold. And it's like, that's not every dad, right? And you get to the point where it's like people will say stuff, and you and I have had this conversation on multiple occasions. People will say stuff about like, oh yeah, well, but I'm sure that you don't have to deal with any of that. And it's like, nope, this is a 50-50 house that I live in. Like, if anything, because of Crystal's schedule and the way that her job works, when things are normal, I think that I end up actually taking on more of the responsibilities around the house specifically, because she'll work nights and stuff like that. Like not overnight, but like in the evenings and that sort of thing. So it's like bedtime and that sort of stuff. Like when Crystal was working full time before Cassie came, I was doing bedtime most nights with Kara. Right. Like, and that's like the way that things are in our house, and it's different for everybody. But I think that a lot of people see stuff on TV and they assume that that's the way that it is. So it was just really refreshing when I started getting into the show to see like, oh, actually, like the dad is the one who's around most of the time. And it often seems like mom is kind of like coming and going.
Yeah.
But like, he's kind of there most of the time. And I just thought that was a really great aspect to it. A, because it's super relatable for me, but B, because it also it gives kids a different perspective of like, I think most kids that age that watch this show, because it is a show for preschoolers, I think most of them are very clingy to mom, right? Like that's just it's just a phase, a developmental phase that kids go through. So I think this show being very conscious of like, yeah, but dad's fun. Like dad's the one who will get on the ground and pretend to be a gorilla for you, right? And like it's so aspirational because of how much he commits to the game that they'll play. Right. And like, that's where I say like he's a much better dad than me, because I am not that committed. You get me for maybe 5 minutes. My kids
actually said to me one day, they're like, how come you don't play with us like Bluey's dad plays with them? And I said, hold on.
Yeah.
He is a cartoon character, but he is also a much better dad than me.
Yeah. Yeah. He's not nearly as tired as I am. That's why.
Right. I'm also, I think this was about maybe like second or third week from work from home. And I was just like, listen, like I understand I am home, but like I still have all these expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, I don't know. It's just like every aspect of the show seems to be firing on all cylinders. It's just a really, really well put together piece of animated content. Like I can't kind of speak highly enough of it. Like there's the one season. It's 18 episodes, maybe 17 episodes, and within that there are 3 stories in each episode.
It's maybe 20 episodes for 3 mini episodes in the way it's set up. And
there's a couple episodes towards the end of the season that actually recycle some of the previous episodes.
Well, I think it was the Christmas special, because it's got the Christmas veranda or Santa veranda or veranda Santa.
Veranda Santa.
And then it's got Mount Mom and Dad and then Asparagus.
Yeah.
Those 3 episodes. And then the season finale episode has a different first episode, but Mount Mom and Dad and Asparagus, I think, close it out again. Yeah. So yes. But,
so when you make it to the end, you're like, I am really tired of Mount Mom and Dad and Asparagus. Right. So those are probably my least favorite episodes. Right. But we've been through the season probably like since lockdown started, probably about 4 or 5 times. But I will still find myself like zoning in on the show when I'm watching it with
finding funny things.
Excuse me.
Or finding something going on. Like there's always a random kid character, like doing something in the background that just will make you laugh. Muffin's always doing something stupid, or Bingo's always doing something stupid.
God, Muffin is such a great character. I love Muffin.
I have to point out one thing. I had one issue with the show. There's at one point, because I was confused, because at one point Muffin has a little brother or sister, a sibling.
Socks.
But at one point they're playing a game, and you don't know that it's a game necessarily, but Socks has a collar and a leash on. And I was like, are there dogs in this world of dogs?
Yeah.
And I was like, that's really confusing. And then when I did some research, it's like, yeah, it's a sibling. And I'm like, that's really weird, because in an episode, Socks has a collar and a leash on, and Bluey's walking her. And I'm like, this is weird. But like, other than that, like, I mean,
well, Socks always walks on all fours, but that's because if you're paying attention, you gotta pay real close attention on this show for preschoolers. Socks is only a year old.
Yeah, Socks is a baby.
Yeah, so Socks behaves differently from the others. Doesn't Socks has like maybe 3 or 4 words.
I was gonna say,
and acts like a dog.
Apparently. Yeah,
like she doesn't act like, she doesn't behave like everybody else who behave like humans. Although at the same time, it's unlike, let's say, anthropomorphic animals like the Fab Five of like Goofy is never gonna get on the carpet and rub his butt on it. But there's the episode about Bingo being sick. And it's so good. I can't even like say it out loud without laughing, because it's so funny. They get to the part where it's like, oh, he's got to find Bluey has to find somebody who hasn't been sick, and so she goes to her dad and is like, oh, I need you. This is gonna sound really weird. I need your purple pants, but only if you haven't been sick. And he looks right into the camera, because they're making a video, and he goes, oh no, I've had ringworm, or I've had bumworms.
I've had bumworms.
Which is a thing that dogs get. That's not a regular ailment. That's specifically a dog thing. And then he scratches his butt afterwards, and we see and it's not the only time in the series where I think we see him scratching his butt like that. And he's actually he has bumworms because he's a dog. So there are things that they do every once in a while. That episode, the one at the park where Bingo is trying to get water out of the drinking fountain, her solution is to push the button and wait for it to overflow and all of the water to fall onto the ground. And then when that happens, she goes over. Her triumphant moment is that she goes over and she drinks the water off the ground. And Bandit has the great reaction of less than ideal, but good for you. But I always say to Cara when we're watching that episode, I go, now, okay, listen, don't drink water off the ground. It's okay for Bingo because she's a dog. And Cara will go, okay, yeah, it's okay. She's a dog. I don't drink water off the ground. I'm like, yes, thank you. Yeah, anyways, we've talked about Bluey for almost half an hour.
And everything else for almost 2 hours.
Yeah, it's getting late. We've mission accomplished, I think.
I think so.
Thank you, Matt, for being on. I greatly appreciate it. But obviously, this was just an excuse for us to talk, right?
It was.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I hope that I get down there to see you sooner rather than later. But
it's looking later than sooner. But.
Yeah, really. But let's do another one of these and talk about some Star Wars once Clone Wars is over.
For sure.
So we'll figure that out. But that is it for this episode of the Quarantine Zone. Thank you for listening. Of course, if you like what you heard, you can. I didn't do any of this stuff. I haven't said any of the things. This is a Thunderquack podcast. This is part of the Thunderquack Podcast Network. Head to thunderquack.com to check out all the other great podcasts in our network. And if you like what you hear, you can support us in 3 ways. First, in whatever podcast service you're listening to this on, go and give us a rating, a like, a review, a thumbsy upsies, or whatever it is in whatever app. There are 10,000 podcast services. Have you noticed this? It's every week there's another app to download your podcast with. How can they possibly be better than one another? I don't understand it, but whatever. Whichever one you like to use, just make sure that people know that you like the podcast, because it'll help other people, new people, find the podcast. and we appreciate that. The other ways are by going to store.thunderquack.com to pick up some merchandise, and last but not least, by heading to patreon.com /Thunderquack, where you can kick in with your monthly pledge of support and get some cool rewards. For instance, you can get the Thunderquack podcast early. You can get it ad free. You can get the uncut version, which usually has about an extra half an hour on it. Or if you're a really cool person, you get that stuff, but then also get a Patreon producer shout out like Brian Murowski and Jason Samuel do every week on the podcast, and like they just did now. So go check that out, patreon.com/Thunderquack. Thank you to everybody who does support us. But as I've said on other podcasts recently, that shouldn't be the first thing that you're spending your disposable income on right now. There are a lot of really important causes that need help. Food banks. There are COVID-19 relief organizations that need money. So definitely go give a couple bucks to them first, and then if you've got $1 left over, you can come throw that at us. But certainly don't feel like you need to prioritize supporting us on Patreon. And actually, one of the things that I'll say is there are a lot of places that would normally have people walking through the doors, places similar to a Disneyland, but that are a little bit more of a non-for-profit. A lot of scientific and educational institutions that need help right now. In Vancouver here, the Vancouver Aquarium is in danger of shutting down permanently, and we've got a place called Science World, which is like our local science center, that is also in danger of shutting down permanently. Places like that need help right now because they don't have people coming in through their doors. So if you can afford to, I would say donate to those as well, because we want those things when life gets back to normal. It's I got to have a place to take my kids for an afternoon where they can burn off some energy and learn something, hopefully in the process, and see like these places, especially like aquariums and some zoos, are doing important research, scientific research, and in the instance of Vancouver Aquarium, they do marine mammal rescue, and they pay for that with basically the money from the aquarium. And so there are a lot of places like that. I'm sure wherever you are right now listening to this, there is an institution somewhere nearby that needs your help to stay afloat at the moment. So along with your ordering out and supporting local restaurants and small businesses, make sure that you're paying attention to those non-for-profits that rely on donations and ticket admission revenue, because they're really hurting because they're kind of getting overshadowed by a lot of other stuff. Kind of a bummer to go out on, but it's an important thing, so I just want to make sure that I brought that up. Again, thank you, Matt, for coming on. We'll have you on again before all of this is over, because it's not going away anytime soon.
I'm being bandit for the foreseeable future.
There you go. Hopefully we'll all be better dads by the end of this. But moms don't need to worry about it, because moms are already better than we are in almost every instance. It's very frustrating. I don't know why it's so much more work for us. But anyways, thank you for being on. Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you on the next Quarantine Zone.
Yeah, make sure you wash your hands.